kitchen, as you're having your breakfast, whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Is today the day the UK became an inflation nation?
That's right, bad news. The rate remains unchanged at 8.7%. This means that interest rates are highly likely to rise again tomorrow, and we may be staring down the barrel of a mortgage time bomb. How are you coping? Let me know. GB News at gbnews@gbviews.com.
And the search, of course, continues for the missing Titanic tourist sub. It's now reached a critical point. Banging has been picked up by sonar devices. As documents show, safety concerns were raised even before the vessel disappeared on Sunday.
Yeah, awful news for the families who are waiting. And the Prince of Wales, of course, is celebrating his 41st birthday today. He's going to unveil a major campaign on homelessness later this month. It's a cause the future king holds dear to his heart, and we're going to be looking at that later in the show.
Those inflation figures are a shocker. Halligan was saying yesterday, it'd be terrible if it's still got an 8 in front. It hasn't moved at all.
Yeah, we're going to have Liam in the studio to let us know what it might mean for you in real life, in actuality. Yeah. What does this concept of inflation mean for you and your bank account? But first of all, here is your news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The government has set out a major package of financial support for Ukraine to bolster their economic stability as it continues to push back Russian forces. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Bank loan guarantees, will support vital public services, including the cost of running schools and hospitals. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war.
A vibrant, dynamic, creative European country that refuses to be subdued. So together with our allies, we will maintain our support for Ukraine's defence and for the counter-offensive. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for them to continue and to win this war.
The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations of a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed at 8.7% up until May, the same rate as in April. Economists had predicted that the consumer price inflation would have dropped to 8.4%. The Chancellor said the government will continue to support the Bank of England as it seeks to squeeze inflation out of the economy. GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan says more could have been done to curb the rise.
I do think now the UK will come to be seen as an outlier when it comes to inflation, and it's going to spark a lot of conversations about how we run our monetary policy, the Bank of England's independence, why the Bank of England was so slow to start raising interest rates, and whether or not, had they started earlier, got on top of those inflation expectations, we wouldn't have had to have interest rates so high for so long.
Banging sounds have been heard in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic Ocean. 5 people in total are missing. They have under 40 hours of oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. King Charles has asked to be kept informed on the search for the missing vessel. And retail giants WH Smith, Marks & Spencer and Argos have been named and shamed for failing to pay the minimum wage. Almost £5 million was found to be owed to around 63,000 workers following investigations dating back as far as 2017. Named employers have been made to pay back what they owed and, in addition, were fined around £7 million. High street retailer WH Smith was the worst offender, according to HMRC, with the new figures claiming it failed to pay around £1 million to over 17.5 workers, while the retailer blamed this on an error related to its company uniform policy. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Well, those inflation figures are grim. There's no other way to put it. It's staying stubbornly at 8.7%. When we talked to Liam Halligan yesterday, he said it would be bad news if there's an 8 in front of it. It hasn't moved at all, according to the Office for National Statistics.
So, here to run us through it is Liam Halligan with On the Money.
This cost of living crisis is ongoing. This is an inflation shock. The UK now with the highest inflation among all the G7 advanced industrialised countries. So what were those figures when they came out at 7 o'clock this morning? Well, in April 2023, the Consumer Price Index was 8.7% higher than it was in the same month in 2022. It was widely expected to fall this month, but actually the new number for May was the same, 8.7%. That was a real shock, and that seriously complicates the Bank of England's response to these ongoing price pressures. As I say, the UK is now an outlier among the advanced industrialised countries. Our inflation is 8.7%. In the Eurozone, it's just 6.1% in May, the same month. And in the US, inflation is down at 4%, though the US and the Eurozone have much cheaper energy costs than we do here in Britain. What's causing this ongoing inflation? It's still food prices. Price pressures are extremely high, as shoppers know when they visit their supermarkets. Again, food price inflation are soaring 19.1% in April and still extremely high, 18.3% in May. And it's not just food prices. If economists strip out the price of energy and the price of food, which are very volatile, and they look at core inflation, this is a measure of inflation pressures in supply chains, wage pressures coming through. Core inflation is rising. It's not just staying where it is. It's certainly not coming down. It's rising from 6.2% in March, 6.8% in April, and 7.1% in May. And this is what will really worry the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee as they meet today and tomorrow to set interest rates. The next interest rate decision will be announced at 12 o'clock tomorrow. We've had ultra-low interest rates in 2017 all the way through to 2021. During that period, many people fixed their mortgages on 5, 3 or 2-year deals. Since the end of 2021, as inflation surged before the war in Ukraine, we've had 12 successive interest rate rises by the Bank of England from all the way up to 4.5%. Well, tomorrow it may be 4.75%. It may even be 5% with a much bigger interest rate rise than expected. That is going to squeeze mortgage rates further, particularly for households that are coming off those 5, 3 and 2-year fixed rate deals, ultra low, and now they're fully exposed to mortgage rates of 5, 6, 7 or even 8%. But it is good news for savers as long as the banks and building societies are quick to pass these rate rises on. So the UK, it is the inflation nation. The cost of living is going to continue to dominate our politics for weeks and months to come. Price pressures are persisting, and there's more to come.
Thank you, Liam. So with the cost of living crisis continuing and concerns of even higher mortgage rates, our reporter Anna Riley has been speaking to people in Hull about their day-to-day spending.
Energy, I would say definitely. It's gone up vastly compared to what I was paying, well, a year ago, really. But also food prices.
Your food bills, every time you go and shop, it's gone up. Not just 5p, it goes up 50p and more.
Just about everything what's going on, it's so dear now, I can't afford things what I used to.
So groceries, etc. have gone up by at least, 50% nearly, you know, it seems to have gone up a lot.
I can't just think of specific items, but I just know that where I used to spend about £6 at the weekend, now I'm spending 20.
So it's tough for people out there. Let us know how hard you're finding it. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. And the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, is with us in the studio. What are your thoughts on these inflation
This is a grim morning, but I have to say, this was not a shock to me, because we have, as Liam Halligan has just said, the highest energy costs, the highest electricity costs in the Western world. This is the price of net zero. Be under no illusion whatsoever. Those energy prices are going through everybody's bills, including businesses that therefore have to raise the price of food and everything else. So we are uncompetitive, and this will go on and on. What's the government and the Bank of England think? It's the definition of madness to keep doing the same thing and expect a different answer. Why would you keep raising interest rates when it's making not a jot of difference? Because this is cost-plus inflation. They are so stupid, they are so thick, it absolutely infuriates me. What is that Governor of Bank of England still doing in his job? He's failed, he should resign, or he should be fired.
Apparently, to get rid of Governor of the Bank of England, he or she has to be mentally incapacitated. How ridiculous is that? I think this is that.
By your definition, that's what you're clearly seeing at the moment.
I think we're pretty close to that. I mean, this is unbelievable, and there is nothing that is going to change this. And I'll tell you why. We have the highest percentage of renewable and offshore wind in the world.
Yeah.
So gas prices are back to 2021 levels. Where are electricity prices? Still double where they were. Why? Because of the cost of our renewable energy. This is the reason, and it's about time everybody in this country woke up to what is going on.
But you're not allowed to say that, Richard Tice. This is the problem with the net zero agenda, isn't it? That anybody who expresses an idea that they'd like to have more renewables, fossil fuels rather than renewables, is considered to be wanting to destroy the planet. It's a beautiful business model.
They won't tell the truth. What they want to do, they want to lie and blame Brexit. The likes of Carney and everybody else and all the Ramonas, they'll blame Brexit. The truth is, this is the price of their renewable dream.
And it's not going to get any better if Labour win the election, which they will, because I think this is absolutely the day the Tories lost the election, because interest rates are going to go soaring again. That will be the 13th consecutive rise. We had ludicrous Starmer saying he's going to lift the ban on onshore wind farms. We're going to even more of it.
Let me tell you, we haven't even seen the worst of it.
Yeah.
You've got KPMG saying that every household is going to have an extra £1,000 per year because of the cost of net zero for the next decade. There is a simple solution to this. You've got to slash government spending, wasteful government spending, that we all see across our lives every single day of the week. And then you cut consumer taxes. If you cut consumer taxes like fuel duty, like VAT, we at Reform UK have had an emergency economic recovery plan for a year. Mathematically, inflation would come down immediately because you've reduced prices.
And Richard, buried in these inflation figures is you know this better than most, core inflation, which is what, when you strip out volatiles like oil and food, has gone up to 7.1%, the highest since 1992. Oh my God, so it's going to get even worse.
It's getting worse because businesses, they have to recover their input costs. The greatest rise has been the rise in energy costs.
Yeah.
And, of course, taxes are going up. Yeah. Businesses are paying higher taxes, as is the consumer, because the government is wasting ever more money. And so that all feeds into this.
And look at the food prices. There's a list here. Sugar has gone up in the last 12 months, 47%, olive oil 46%, eggs 37%, sauces 34%, low-fat milk 33%, frozen vegetables 31%. This is really hurting families hard.
But we know, for example, you talk about eggs, we know that farmers, again, were struggling because of the cost of energy last Christmas, and so they were giving up. They were saying, we're not going to bother, we're not going to produce eggs. So, surprise, surprise, there's a shortage, the price goes up. This is all down to the price of energy because of Westminster's obsession with net zero. And I promise you that people will eventually rise up and realise what is going on and saying, we're not doing it.
It was Boris's policy, so we've got a different Prime Minister now. Why doesn't Rishi ditch it?
Because he doesn't understand it, because he's completely out of touch. How can you have, in the nicest possible way, someone in his position, so wealthy, he doesn't understand food bills. He doesn't understand the difficulty of just getting to the end of the week without a bailiff turning up. So they've got not a clue about what's going on. What really depresses me, this is basic economics. This is A-level stuff, for heaven's sake. And you've got supposedly smart, intelligent people in the Treasury who should know better. They don't, and frankly, until some of them are fired, we are in deep, deep trouble.
What role does Jeremy Hunt play in this? Because I think it's too simple to lay this at the door of Rishi Sunak. It's Jeremy Hunt who's very quiet on days like this, but remember, as the Chancellor, he is pulling the strings in terms of our economy.
Look, he basically does what his Treasury officials tell him. I mean, let's remember, what was actually his qualifications? He'd never been in the Treasury before, right? No one ever suggested that he was a potential Chancellor. He appeared from nowhere. Who knows who told Liz Truss to appoint him? So I don't think he's got any qualifications, frankly. We've got the wrong people in the wrong job at the most critical time, and it's ordinary people up and down the country who are paying the price.
Can I just ask you, these by-elections, which are now 3 of them, I think, that are going to have to be run because of the resignations, are Reform going to stand candidates in those 3 by-elections?
Yes, so we are standing in Selby, we'll be standing in Somerton, we're not standing in Uxbridge. Lawrence Fox is standing in Uxbridge, and so we've stood aside.
For the Reclaim Party,
He's standing for the Reclaim Party, yes.
So did you feel that 2 new parties would be what? Were 2 divided for the independent vote?
A number of people have said to us, you ought to be able to work together on certain specific issues. And we were delighted to be able to do that. We've said we'll work with the SDP on certain specific constituencies. So that's a pragmatic, sensible approach. And we will be standing, if Nadine Dorries does eventually properly resign, we will be standing in mid-beds.
Go back to interest rates, Richard. The system is independence for the Bank of England, so they set interest rates. The Chancellor can't change them. Would you take the independence away from the Bank of England?
The principle of independence is a good one. The problem is his target is it's too sort of isolated. The target should be you need 2% growth and 2% inflation. If he had that target, then he's got to look at other things. You need a blended target, like they have elsewhere, for example, in the US. But fundamentally, they do need to work together because the Governor of the Bank of England should be able to say to the government, look, the lever of interest rates sometimes won't work because this is cost-push inflation. It's not an excess of demand. Fine, if we all had loads of money in our pockets and were spending that money gaily every day in clubs and travelling, that would be different. Raise interest rates. This is completely different.
I'm going to ask you, the Prime Minister spoke at a conference, a major conference today, about Ukraine and raising private finance to help the reconstruction of Ukraine. How long do you think the public is going to continue to support billions of pounds of their hard-earned taxpayers' money going into Ukraine when they're facing the worst inflation for 30 or 40 years?
It's a really good question, and I suspect the answer is that support for helping and protecting and defending Ukraine will start to waver for those very understandable reasons. And then you say, hang on, we haven't even sorted the war, and now we'll talk about we're going to have to start paying for it. And you know, the government and the Prime Minister has got some serious explaining to do as to the relationship between the two. Look, I'm fully in favour of standing up to the bully Putin. But what you need is a domestic policy that works, that creates growth in this country, and then people will understand that, yes, that is a price worth paying in order to stand up to the bully.
Before you go, because we're up against the clock a little bit, just for a moment, reflect on this Titanic situation, this Ocean Gate sub which has gone missing. You will know the kind of guys who have got the funds to spend on those sorts of trips. What motivates them to want to spend $250,000, Richard, on that?
I'm scared of heights and I'm claustrophobic. I wouldn't be motivated. If I had £1 billion and I wouldn't go anywhere near that thing. But if I was tempted, I would make sure there was a proper plan B. And, you know, tragically, let's hope that a miracle happens. But you always need a plan B in any walk of life.
No escape pod.
No escape pod whatsoever. I mean, they actually can't get out unless someone opens it from the outside.
Yeah, they're locked in.
Right, Richard, good to see you. OK, so on that topic, the rescuers searching for the Titan sub have reportedly heard banging sounds near to where the vessel went missing.
Safety fears apparently were raised before it disappeared, according to reports emerging. According to some authorities, there is around 30 hours of oxygen left, so time is fast running out.
So Mike Wellman is a marine operations specialist and joins us now. Good morning, Mike. Just give us an idea. What does a marine operations specialist do? What's your experience?
OK, I go back to quite a few years now as a military diver, and then went into the commercial diving field and operated around the world in the offshore oil and gas industry, where we dealt and used a lot of the equipment that is going to be seen in this rescue. So I've got a lot of experience and knowledge in that, and that's the foundation. This has come. I'm not surprised because some of these activities are risky, to say the least, and we've seen that with people going up into space and trying to go up. Private organisations, you know, come for a jolly holiday. This is a very, very serious business. If you're going to go down there, 12,500 feet, you know, how do you get back? You just said, you know, there has to be a plan B. Yes, there does. There is no plan B here. I'm watching the pictures now. It's a little boat, a little submarine. It's gone down. There are now reports coming out that it wasn't properly constructed. We don't know, and I wouldn't speculate on that because that's for investigators down the line. But at the moment, it's pretty good news that there was knocking being picked up. It's been picked up by transponders dropped from aircraft that can pick up sounds. So when they were picked that up, it could be something else banging. We don't know, but it's hopeful that they might still be alive.
How easy is it to detect that sort of sound, Mike? I mean, we know that sound travels quite well in water, doesn't it? But presumably after a certain distance, you just wouldn't hear anything.
A lot of the what you can hear underwater is military, and it's highly classified. But they spend their lives, all the different big nations, searching for other people's submarines. So it's quite known technology. But what it can actually achieve is in many cases classified. But certainly if they drop sonar buoys around the location of the Titanic and somebody inside is banging on there, that noise will transmit out and those sonar buoys should pick it up.
Mike, are you surprised, as Richard Tice was saying, there should have been a plan B? There was no plan B. There is no escape pod whatsoever. There's no winch. There's no contact with the surface. So even if they find the vessel, somehow they've got to get a vessel down there to winch it to the surface.
Yeah, and this is what's going on at the moment in Canada now. They're mobilising a very large and capable ROV. It's an unmanned vehicle. It's on an umbilical. It's controlled from the surface. It will go down. But they've got to find this vehicle. As I've said to somebody else, it's like looking for a 5p coin on a football field. It's not easy.
What would they use to find it, Mike? Sorry to interrupt, but what technology do they use to actually scan the area?
Sonar.
Right.
They have a sonar going out. But remember, there's a lot of debris down there. And, of course, they'll use cameras. They'll fly on various courses, plan it out. The French are sending out an autonomous mini-sub, for want of another word. It doesn't have anybody on board, but it flies without being tethered to the surface. And that can go and it can move around quite freely.
Right.
And it can search for sounds or noise, and then it can relay pictures back to the surface. So you're going to have quite a bit of technology out there, but it's the depth of water that's the big problem. All this works really well in shallower water, but deep water, it's a bit different.
Mike, you have huge experience here. Could I press you and ask you what, in your view, really is the realistic prospect that they can find this submersible in time?
Well, they're clearly running out of time. If we know now that somebody is in there and is making banging noises, I don't know whether that's continuing. I would hope that they're going to report if it is. If they can find it, the big ROV can use its cameras to look inside through the port and can look on the outside to see if there's any damage to the craft itself. So they get that phase done. But then in a later phase, you're going to have to put down a lifting cable, which is an enormous task. That's going to have to go down and lift this, be attached to this craft, this mini-sub, and lift it to the surface.
All right, that's Mike Wellen, Marine Operations Specialist. Mike, thanks for joining us. Richard's still with us. Do you think this should be regulated? I mean, I don't want regulation in too much in my life because we hate the nanny state.
We spend a life trying to deregulate.
But when you think, there's a 19-year-old boy on that vessel with his dad, which I think is reckless.
Our heart goes out. We encourage private enterprise.
We do.
But we learn, and we never stop learning. And it does seem extraordinary that it's unregulated, if that really is the case. Previous expeditions, I understand, have been done in conjunction with navies of different countries, with authorities. So, serious questions will have to be asked in the aftermath of resolving this.
I'm going to push you a little bit on the question I asked you earlier about the mindset of these very, very rich men who want to do these activities which involve risk. Is it because it's that kind of thing about what do you buy the man who's got everything? All they want is a good dinner party story. Is it literally that?
I don't know. Look, I love risk. I mean, I do some pretty extreme skiing. I've been involved in business. I've taken risk. I enjoy risk. I think there's a certain sort of entrepreneurial, and if you've got that entrepreneurial bug, then it's with you, and you keep pushing and you keep pushing, and so you just push ever further, I guess.
Is it a male thing? Because all 5 are men.
I'll get in terrible trouble. Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble. No, I'm not going to go there, Andrew. You're tempting me, but...
No, but you know what? I would say in defence of men, I think men tend to be risk takers. They tend to want to push the boundaries. You've got your hunter-gatherer instincts. And thank God for men wanting to push the boundaries of various endeavours. Just as I'm talking about men being fabulous, we've got to move on.
Yeah.
Sorry, Richard, they're counting me down. We really have to go.
Richard's
We're going to be talking
fabulous.
about this a bit more. Always fabulous.
Still to come. More on the submersible and today's inflation figures. What that's going to mean for the money in your pocket or the lack of money in your pocket. This is To The Point on GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 21st of June. This is To The Point on GB News with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
The inflation rate remains unchanged at 8.7%. Interest rates, they're going to go up tomorrow for sure, increasing fears of a mortgage time bomb. How are you coping? Get in touch, gbnews at gbviews.com.
And the search for the missing Titanic tourist sub has reached a critical point. Banging has been picked up by sonar devices. A new document shows safety concerns were raised before the vessel's disappearance.
And the Prince of Wales, Prince William to others, is celebrating his 41st birthday today. Happy birthday, sir. He's going to unveil a major campaign on homelessness. It's a cause the future king's championed since childhood, and we'll be marking it later in the show.
So we will get some of your messages. gbviews at gbnews.com is the email address. But first of all, here is the latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The government has set out a major package of financial support for Ukraine to bolster their economic stability as it continues to push back Russian forces. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Bank loan guarantees, will support vital public services, including the cost of running schools and hospitals. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war.
It's a vibrant, dynamic, creative European country that refuses to be subdued. So together with our allies, we will maintain our support for Ukraine's defence and for the counter-offensive. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for them to continue and to win this war.
The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations of a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed at 8.7% up until May, the same rate as in April. Economists had predicted that the consumer price inflation would have dropped to 8.4%. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says the government will continue to support the Bank of England as it seeks to squeeze inflation out of our economy. GB News' economics and business editor Liam Halligan says more could have been done to curb the rise.
I do think now the UK will come to be seen as an outlier when it comes to inflation, and it's going to spark a lot of conversations about how we run our monetary policy, the Bank of England's independence, why the Bank of England was so slow to start raising interest rates, and whether or not, had they started earlier, got on top of those inflation expectations, we wouldn't have had to have interest rates so high for so long.
Meanwhile, the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April, slowing from 4.1% in March, according to official figures. London experienced the greatest monthly price rise with an increase of 1.2%, and the North East experienced the greatest annual price rise, up by 5.5%. Banging sounds have been heard in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic Ocean. 5 people in total are missing. They have under 40 hours of oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. King Charles has asked to be kept informed on the search for the missing vessel.
It's simply entangled. The moment we could free it, it may be able to bring itself back to the surface. That's what it is, they've said, is designed to do. If it hasn't come up, it's because it can't. If we have to try and figure out how we're going to go down and make an attachment, 13,000 feet of cable is going to be reasonably impossible.
Retail giants WH Smith, Marks & Spencer's and Argos have been named and shamed for failing to pay the minimum wage. Almost £5 million was found to be owed to around 63,000 workers following investigations dating back as far as 2017. Named employers have been made to pay back what they owed and in addition were fined around £7 million. High street retailer WH Smith was the worst offender according to HMRC, with the new figures claiming it had to pay around £1 million to over 17.5 workers. The retailer blamed this on an error related to its company uniform policy. The UK debt reached more than 100% of economic output for the first time since 1961, according to the ONS. This comes as the government borrowed more than £20 billion in May. Net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May, estimated at 100.1% of the gross domestic product. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, said the government has been taking difficult decisions following the pandemic and the invasion of Ukraine. Academics warn there's been a significant rise in the number of teenage girls diagnosed with eating disorders in recent years. Experts say there could be a postcode lottery of care, with those in more deprived areas unable to access the support they need. A Department of Health and Social Care spokesperson says they're investing an additional £2.3 billion a year in the NHS mental health services. And pet insurance payouts reached a record high last year with more than £1 billion in claims. That's a 28% increase from the year before, according to the Association of British Insurers. Due to the cost of living and veterinary costs soaring, more people face higher bills to protect their pets following the increase in pet ownership during the COVID lockdown. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
It's 10:06. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Now, rescuers searching for the Titan sub have reportedly heard banging sounds near to where the vessel went missing. Safety fears were raised, it has been revealed, over the vessel before it went missing.
And according to authorities, there is now probably only 30 hours of oxygen left.
That's right. In November last year, CBS correspondent David Pogue joined OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush, who has been confirmed as missing on the same Titan submersible right now. And a lot of things have emerged from this video. Here's a snippet of their chat from CBS Sunday mornings.
Experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
Inside, the sub has about as much room as a minivan.
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button, that's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
So the older gentleman there is David Stockton, who is the CEO of OceanGate, and that was David Pogue, one of the reporters. And he was meant to go on the trip. David was invited on the trip with them, and in the end, the weather didn't work. Stockton Rush, sorry. So the weather didn't work, was too dangerous, so the trip didn't go.
And just before that, it was launched. That area of Newfoundland had been experiencing some of its worst storm weather for years.
Yeah.
And there was suddenly a window, and they took it.
Yeah.
And probably.
And they couldn't. They couldn't.
A terrible mistake.
That's right. They absolutely. So with us now to talk a little bit more about this in the studio is Pip Thompson, GB News presenter. Morning, Pip. Great to see you. For people who are just catching up with this now, this story, it's been rolling on for a few days. Just give us the background. Where are we at with it?
Where we're at is that there are very few hours left to save the people on this submersible. I think it's looking like 24 hours. So you could say this is make or break day today. They went missing on Sunday. They'd gone out to look at the Titanic wreckage. I think it was a 4-day trip. The actual trip down to the wreckage, 2 hours down in the submersible, few hours looking around, back up you go. But they went missing, connection was lost 1 hour, 45 minutes later, and there has been no sign or sound or signal of them since. More and more rescuers are being deployed. The US Navy, we now understand, is sending what's called a flyaway deep ocean salvage system, which is a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But what that does is recovers heavy undersea objects such as aircraft or small vessels. So that could be important. But at the moment, this submersible, that photo actually we just saw, was the last known sighting of it on Sunday. That is where the wreck of the Titanic is. So that's some 400 miles off Newfoundland. It is a huge, huge area. It really is like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
It is so remote. And the size of the submersible is, I guess, a bus. Now, the question is, at this stage, where on earth is it? It's going to be very difficult to spot from the air. The hope is that it is on the surface. If they spot it, then obviously they have to get the people out. It is bolted from the outside. Right. They've got to get them out. The worst scenario is that the Titan is on the seabed. And just to put it into context, how far down is that? Probably the height of 9 Empire State Buildings, some 2.3 miles down. It makes me shiver just to think about it. It is black at the bottom where the Titanic is. It is black.
Strong
It's near freezing. You've got the water pressure.
Yeah.
So cold that you've got the risk of hypothermia. There is no seating. I think we saw in that CBS piece that people have to sit on the floor. Only one person can stretch out their legs at a time. There is one window that you supposedly can look out of, but you can't because it's black. That is where there is a toilet with a black drape, we understand. So there's no privacy. They're not going to have any supplies because they were only banking on a
8-hour trip.
8-hour trip.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just... It makes you shiver when you think of the situation they could be in.
Pip, that this vessel has had communication problems before when it's gone underwater. But obviously, we don't know what's caused this communication problem, whether it's been caught up in the wreckage of the Titanic, for instance, which could be...
Well, this is the greatest fear, that it is entangled in the wreckage of the Titanic. Now, even if... And, OK, this is the worst case. Even if it is found, how on earth, with very few hours left, are you going to get it back up?
Yeah.
Because I don't think deep-sea divers can go down or do go down 2.3 miles.
No.
So how on earth do you bring it back up?
It makes you wonder if all these support vessels that they're now pouring into the area should have been there in the first place. But, of course, that would have put up the cost of the trip. These are billionaires. They can afford
let's
it.
remind ourselves, this trip was some £200,000.
Chicken feed.
So you have to be seriously wealthy. And we should just remember that there are 3 Britons on board. I think we do have photos of one or some of them. They are Hamish Harding, an adventurer, very experienced at this kind of thing, Guinness World Record holder. He very excitedly, announced his mission last weekend and said, we've got a weather window. I think he said this is possibly the only time this year that this sort of challenge, if you like, can be attempted. So Hamish Harding, and then there is father and son, Shahzada Dawood, and his son Suleiman, who is only 19 years old. Now, they are the 2 gentlemen that I would imagine that are probably at most at risk in terms of being able to, I guess, stay calm because they don't have the experience. The other people on board is Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, and then you've got former French naval diver Paul-Henri Nargeolet. Now, everybody says he's called Mr. Titanic. He was one of the people that first discovered the wreckage quite a few years back. If you're in a situation like this, he is the person that you want with you. He will be keeping people calm because they're going to be having to...
How does a 19-year-old keep calm? With no
And it will be pitch black. I mean, if their lights... I think their lights are... Stockton Rush on that video was talking about the fact that they bought the lights from a camping shop. The little strip light. And he was saying this kind of stuff can be budget, but as long as the integrity of the vehicle...
I read something very interesting. So they pilot it with what's effectively a PlayStation-type game controller.
Unbelievable.
And someone else described this submersible as... Wait for this. A kit car built from parts you can get from Amazon.
Right, thank you, Pip.
It needs regulating.
Joining us now is broadcaster and marine biologist Monty Halls. Good morning, Monty.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, you have a lot of experience of taking out expeditions, not quite like this, admittedly, but you have an understanding of the safety concerns and the risk assessments that need to be done. Looking at this situation now, what do you think might have gone wrong?
It is one of the issues when you're dealing with environments like this with no communications, that it's pure speculation, isn't it? We're all speculating about what could have gone wrong, what the situation is, and potentially how we can get them out. But, entanglement is a distinct possibility. The gloom down there, it is, as just been described. These depths are known as Hadal depths, and from Hades, the word Hades. And it's a good description because it's freezing cold. You're under 6,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, and it's jet black. It is completely black. So in terms of a hostile environment, for us, it's one of the most hostile environments on the planet, if not the most hostile. So things like getting entangled in something is a possibility. A malfunction of the vessel is a possibility. And I think an interesting point that's already been raised is, of course, finding the vessel is just the start, because then you've got to get it up. And that's a whole new set of logistics and a whole new challenge. The opportunity to extract the 5 people from the vessel and get them into another vessel down there is nil. That's not going to happen. So you've got to get the vessel to the surface somehow, and that's a whole new challenge.
And Monty, even if it is at the surface and they've got a lot of ocean to search to find it, they can't open the vessel because they're locked in with external locks. Presumably that's because they don't want, if there was difficulties below the sea, people opening the hatch themselves because of the inevitable problems with water pressure.
Yes, yeah, it's a very valid point that the one thing you cannot predict in these environments is the behaviour of the people you're putting into the environments. And if someone does panic, if someone tries something, grabs the wrong lever or whatever, obviously everyone's potentially in jeopardy. So what they would have created there is a sealed compartment. Obviously, it has to be a sealed compartment that has to be opened externally. Now, the problem with that, of course, is with any sealed compartment, you've got a finite time in terms of oxygen, in terms of the air you're breathing, resources, etc., etc. So the mentality down there, I think everyone else on Earth can only begin to imagine, what it's like down there and what the mentality is you have to adopt. But there is precedent here. There was a submersible in 1973 that went down that was recovered, and the two guys on board said that their mentality was staying absolutely as calm as possible because panic leads to oxygen and air consumption essentially, and that's obviously that's the limiting factor. That's the finite thing here, is how quickly that oxygen is consumed. So staying calm, but it is heartening to hear that these banging sounds being heard every 30 minutes. Now, that is a very clear strategy by, we would hope, the occupants of that vessel to think, right, we signal every 30 minutes there's a little burst of activity, because sound is probably the one way you can locate this submersible down there.
Why wouldn't you do it, say, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes? Why would you choose half an hour?
I think it's some energy consumption. I think they're thinking, well, if they do it every 5 minutes, it takes energy. When you expend energy, you're using your air supply. And I think just pacing it every half hour or so, that gives them a reasonable opportunity. And obviously, we've only just picked up these sounds. They may well have been doing it every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes initially, but now they're spacing it out. It seems a very sensible strategy. As many people have said, locating something like this down there, it's a 22-foot long vessel down there. We all have an impression that the seabed's completely flat. It's not. It's undulating. There's gullies, there's ravines, there's obstacles, there's rock formations. And if you can imagine, jet black, dead of night, trying to find a 22-foot vessel that won't have any lights, at this stage because of the duration it's been down there. It's hard enough on land, but down there it's a real problem. So sound is the one way I think it could be found.
OK. Could talk to you all morning, Monty, but thank you so much for giving up your time. He's so experienced in this area of expeditions, particularly marine.
The more you hear and read into it, the more deeply depressing and frightening it is, isn't it, down there? I mean, as he said, Hades, hell.
Yeah, Hadal depths.
Yeah,
OK, moving on.
Before.
The latest Office of National Statistics figures have been released this morning. They're showing that the UK's inflation rate remains at 8.7%.
It's a political disaster. It's also going to be an economic disaster for millions of families. So joining us now are our reporters across the country, Jack Carson in Sutton Coldfield, Anna Riley in Huddersfield. To you, Jack, first. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm here in Sutton Coldfield on an industrial estate because small businesses are one of those sectors in the private economy that's going to be really disturbed by these figures that inflation has stayed at 8.7%. I've been speaking to Steve Hardiman, who's the managing director at Clevedon here, which makes fasteners and rivets here in the West Midlands, and he's been telling me about the realistic and the reality of running a business with inflation this high. The fact is that usually they'd be working here 5 days a week. He's had to cut that down to 4 because of his energy costs have now gone up to £16,000 per month. So to make sure they can get the most and still be as productive but not use energy for 5 days and try and cut down on those costs, that they are only working now 4 days a week. But he's also told me this morning that he doesn't feel now that the government are listening to small businesses and that rather consult bigger businesses, they also need to really factor in the impact that this is having on small businesses, and he's extremely worried about tomorrow's interest rate decision and what that could mean for his business, not only of course with borrowing, but also how sustainable it is for him to continue his business and obviously keep his prices so that customers still come to him, but also of course not put himself out of business.
Thank you, Jack. Anna Riley in Huddersfield. Anna, how hard are people finding it there?
Very difficult. If it's not energy, it's food that people are concerned about, and food makes up a high proportion of that inflation rate. That's why I've been here at Cottage Foods in Huddersfield. They are a delivered ingredients food wholesaler. They provide ingredients to chefs, to restaurants and to pubs in the area, and I'm joined by their managing director, Alistair Cullen. Alistair, what do you make of that inflation figure remaining at 8.7%?
It's a bit disappointing. We were hoping for a drop. We've seen quite heavy increases over the last 2 years, specifically the last 6 months. I know our customers are feeling it and trying to manage their way through whilst keeping a focus on quality. But yeah, it'd be nice to see a bit more of a drop very shortly.
And with those food prices, where have you seen the most of the increases?
Across the basics, which is quite interesting. Some of our specialist stuff that we bring in from Japan, but we've not actually seen such a big increase there. But your basics such as butter, dairy, flour, etc. have seen some real increases over the last 2 years.
And with the hospitality sector that you're providing to, what have they been saying?
It's been difficult. It's been difficult on a number of fronts, ingredient costs, staffing costs, etc., as well as marketing to customers when wallets are tight. So again, trying to focus on innovation for them has been a big thing, but certainly they could do with some help at the moment.
And do you think the government should be doing more for businesses like yourself? What would you like to see the next inflation figure be?
Absolutely. A significant cut would be nice. I think there's a lack of understanding of how small business operates, especially in the north of England from the government. And yeah, wage rises and everything coming, there's no let up on the onslaught.
Fingers crossed for something better in the future, hey? So, yeah, that's the view here from Cottage Foods in Huddersfield on that inflation figure remaining at 8.7%.
Anna Riley in Huddersfield, thank you very much. It's really tough out there for people, for small businesses in particular.
And it's going to get a lot tougher. And look at those food prices I read. Food inflation is running at 18.3%. Main inflation 8.7%, and they're losing the fight against inflation.
Almost like they're deliberately trying to close small businesses, so we're just left with corporations
and they
at
can
the
put
top.
Interest rates up again. As Richard Tyler said, why keep doing it? Because it's not working.
No. Right, we're going to have Liam Halligan back in the studio in just a while to go through these figures again and work out what on earth is going on with our economy. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:27 with To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Lots of views coming in about these inflation figures. David says the sad thing about the pain of net zero, he's right, it's all for nothing. All our misguided efforts to combat CO2 leading to economic catastrophe will have no effect whatsoever on the climate.
Greg has said, I agree with Richard Tice, saying that the stubbornness of inflation and interest rates is purely down to the aggressive drive towards the unaffordable net zero that is destined to fail.
Yeah, and there's many more of that.
Yeah,
Liam Halligan is back in the studio with us. Liam, we were talking earlier. Tell us about core inflation, because that's another very worrying iceberg in these figures.
So core inflation is a technical measure that economists look at which strips out volatile items, things where prices go up and down, like food, like energy, alcohol, tobacco. It's meant to capture, Andrew, underlying price pressures, supply chain issues, wage bargaining trends, and so on. And core inflation, far from coming down or even staying the same, it's actually going up. So core inflation in March was 6.2%. In April, it was 6.8%. In May, it was 7.1%.
That's a big jump.
And that is really, really worrying. And that's why the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, the 9 economists, will be meeting today and tomorrow. That decision on interest rates, probably going to be, well, certainly going to be their 13th successive interest rate rise, will be announced noon tomorrow. But they will be looking at these core inflations thinking, crikey, we can't afford not to raise interest rates.
But it's not working.
It's not working because interest rates take a time to come through. But if they don't raise interest rates, having bungled their communication strategy for so long, having taken so long in 2021, 2022 to see inflation coming despite warnings from some of us who were dismissed at the time, they now have lost credibility in the markets. If they don't raise rates, the pound will fall, and that will import inflation because a lower pound makes imports, particularly food imports, more expensive. So they are now between a rock and a hard place.
We were just chatting in the break, Andrew and I, about the whole net zero implications and what Richard Tice was saying this morning. And we were saying, you know, why can't Sunak just say, we're going to step away from the net zero agenda for the moment. We're just going to put that on hold.
Yeah.
But they can't because it's a globalist move. They couldn't possibly say that to the World Economic Forum, could they? To the other, to the Davos crowd. They couldn't say, for the sake of our people, we're going to take a different turn.
They've got to decide what's important to them. What's important to them, you know, being seen to help the British people and staying in office, or, you know, getting out of politics young and then getting loads of jet-setting jobs around the global gabfests.
Exactly.
Right? Rishi Sunak made an enormous error earlier this morning. I've got respect for him. You know, he's the Prime Minister. I'm just some, you know, journalist. But he made an error. He needs to get people around him who really understand politics as it's seen on the street. For him to be going on about Ukraine With all respect, an incredibly important subject, but grants and funding to Ukraine at this time will be a red rag to the bulk of the British electorate, even if their views aren't expressed widely on radio and television.
Well, they are expressed here because many of you have been getting in touch and saying that Mark is just one. Giving money to Ukraine while we're in this financial position is like buying a Ferrari while you can't afford shoes for the kids.
And before his speech, Liam, at the very beginning, he should have said, these inflation figures are very disappointing. We feel your pain. We're calling in the banks and building societies on Friday.
We don't care about the foreign dignitaries in the room.
That's right.
Exactly.
We care about the British people. He should have thrown away his speech. He should have looked straight down the lens and said, I understand that lots of you are worried this morning. We are going to help you in some way. We are going to find a way to get through this. We're a wealthy nation. We don't leave people behind. At the same time today, Andrew, this would be the headline if it wasn't for inflation. UK debt has just hit officially 100% of GDP for the first time since 1961. And in 1961, it was on the way down from after the Second World War. Now it's on the way up. Look, I'm not saying...
The more debt, the more the bills go up because you've got to pay interest on it.
More debt, that pushes up interest rates because the markets demand higher rates to lend to the government. Look, I don't want to be alarmist about this. If you have a mortgage, if you're coming off a 5, 3 or 1 year fixed rate deal, a deal that you would have secured at 1 or 2%, and now you face the full wrath of open markets where you're going to get a mortgage rate of 6, 7 or even 8% after the Bank of England has done its worst tomorrow with more rate rises to come. I believe that mortgage providers, banks and building societies will not want to move to repossessions quickly or even at all. They, I'm sure, will offer to extend the term of your loan, to move to interest-only mortgages in order to try and ease the pain of those rising monthly payments. But look, this is really important stuff, and I'm surprised and shocked by these figures, but I'm also surprised and shocked that the Prime Minister is still talking about Ukraine at the top of his speech when he should have directly addressed the British people, whoever else was in the room.
That's what he does, though, isn't it? He ignores the elephant in the room. He can't say it. He'd have Klaus Schwab on the phone saying, you're not allowed to talk about that today. We've got a movement here. We're putting the money into the corporations. Forget about your small businesses in Huddersfield. They don't matter.
I think I agree with that. I also think net zero is part of it. The UK government should now immediately drop energy levies on household bills. Even in Germany, they've done it, where the Greens are in power.
Why can't we?
We're late for the news. Tatiana Sanchez is waiting for us. Here is your morning's news.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The government has set out a major package of financial support for Ukraine to bolster their economic stability as it continues to push back Russian forces. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Bank loan guarantees, will support vital public services, including the cost of running schools and hospitals. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war.
A vibrant, dynamic, creative European country that refuses to be subdued. So together with our allies, we will maintain our support for Ukraine's defence and for the counter-offensive. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for them to continue and to win this war.
The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations of a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed at 8.7% up until May. That's the same rate as in April. Economists had predicted that the consumer price inflation would have dropped to 8.4%. The Chancellor said the government will continue to support the Bank of England as it seeks to squeeze inflation out of the economy. GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan says more could have been done to curb the rise. And banging sounds have been heard in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic. 5 people in total are missing. They may have as little as 24 hours of oxygen left. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. King Charles has asked to be kept informed on the search for the missing vessel.
I do think now the UK will come to be seen as an outlier when it comes to inflation, and it's going to spark a lot of conversations about how we run our monetary policy, the Bank of England's independence, why the Bank of England was so slow to start raising interest rates, and whether or not, had they started earlier, got on top of those inflation expectations, we wouldn't have had to have interest rates so high for so long.
You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2724 and 1.1646 euros. The price of gold is £1,520 and 68 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,560 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
We're chatting. One for the pagans now. It's the summer solstice. We're crossing over to Stonehenge next on To The Point, Britain's news channel. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News.
It's 10:40. This is To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner, and we've got
Well, we got a little bit for the pagans. I know Stephen Pound is in the studio, but we're not going to come to you just yet.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Right. We'll keep people in suspense for you, Stephen. The former Labour MP.
Slightly worried. It's the longest day in the Northern Hemisphere today. Thousands of revellers have gathered at Stonehenge to mark the return of brighter evenings.
Because the UK could experience more than 16 hours of daylight, while the Arctic will likely experience a polar day of complete light for 24 hours. Our reporter, sat in the southwest, Jeff Moody, was in Stonehenge with the pagans this morning.
Well, yes, it's the summer solstice and it's Stonehenge, which means only one thing. I've been up all night, along with thousands of other people. Thousands of people have come to Stonehenge to worship, to look at the stones, and more importantly, to watch the sun as it comes up over the Hailstone at exactly 4:52 this morning, and it illuminates the inner circle at Stonehenge. It really is a pretty magical sight. Jennifer, you're a Stonehenge historian. What an amazing title that is.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a prehistoric archaeologist, so I study the history of this site and many other sites across English heritage.
Why do people come here in their thousands at the summer solstice?
Well, as you said, it's connecting to this cosmic moment, this special moment when the sun appears to stand still in the sky. That's where the term solstice comes from. And
The sol means sun and the stis part means stand, is that right?
Exactly. So it's that longest day, that kind of moment in the key moment in the calendar year where we're celebrating the sun and, you know, the long day and the fertility of the earth. You can see around us, the fields are looking beautiful. They're full of flowers and green things. And the thing that is really key about Stonehenge is the sun is at the center. It's at the heart of the monument. And so that's why people are coming here, to connect to this ancient history and sort of deep time. And for me as an archaeologist, it's really wonderful to see everyone enjoying themselves and celebrating together, but also almost it kind of brings you back to the history of this monument that goes back over 4,000 years and maybe the way people were using the site back then. And these people who built the monument were early farmers. So, you know, their livelihoods really depended on understanding the sun cycles, you know, for their crops and for their animals.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? That people have been doing exactly this, coming here for the summer solstice, staying up all night, partying, worshipping, praying. They've been doing this for thousands of years, haven't they?
Yes, quite possibly. And we know that if you just go about 2 kilometers sort of down the road, we have a massive settlement site. So we know where the people were living when they built the circle, and they were having feasts. And their feasts were primarily over the winter. So we know the winter solstice is incredibly important to the site as well. And again, it connects that period of time when, you know, we've got darkness, the sun is dying, and you want to invoke the light back. So you have this time of year with all the lovely sort of crops ripening and, you know, people really enjoying that's a summer sun. So
why do you think Stonehenge still has this massive appeal to us?
I think because it has this kind of deep history and people want to connect to places, you know, especially out in nature where, you know, you feel like something that's a bit older than yourself that has this kind of deeper meaning and cosmic meaning, and also, you know, connects to the universe, and it makes you think about your place in the universe. And I think the people who built Stonehenge were very much thinking about that and evoking that in this incredible structure, and we still feel that power today.
Well, Stonehenge is certainly older than us, but I must admit, right now I'm feeling pretty old because I've been up all night. So I'm going to go and get some sleep for a while. Back to you.
It makes you think about your place in the universe. That's nice, isn't it? We're going to think about that right now with 2 big thinkers, Labour MP, former Labour MP Stephen Pound, and former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley.
Charlie, I'm going to ask you, if you were in government still, how would you spin these absolutely appalling inflation figures? We're supposed to be halving inflation by the end of the year. It's stuck at 8.7%. We know the core inflation is rising fast. Food inflation still 18.3%. Political disaster.
Yes, and the answer is with great difficulty, because if you set out a platform to have 5 key pledges to grow the economy, halve inflation, reduce debt, stop the small boats, cut the backlog in the NHS.
Very good.
I've got them in the wrong order, but you know, we're all hearing about these 5 key pledges from the Prime Minister. If it is the case that, you know, you're seeing an increase in the numbers of people making that channel crossing, numbers, you know, stubbornly high.
At least not going down.
Not going down. Same with inflation. If it's not going down, then it's a worry. But you have to stick with it. If there's no alternative, you've got to keep hammering home that message. You've got to keep effectively pleading with the public to say, look, we're doing this for the right reasons. It will come down. Keep the faith, and you've got to hope that it does.
The Prime Minister made a speech this morning at a very important conference on Ukraine. He didn't allude even briefly to this terrible news about inflation. He should have.
Well, I think that's right, because I think, look, everybody is worried. The number one issue in the country, whatever survey, is the cost of living crisis. Yeah. And anything to help with the cost of living is going to be on the public's number one mind. And, of course, Ukraine is incredibly important. And, you know, the war in Ukraine has obviously stoked inflation when it comes to energy costs and bills. So it does have an impact on the UK, what's happening in the Ukraine. But, of course, people will be worried more and more as you get close to the election. People will start to look slightly more inwards, and Ukraine will be a second-order issue as opposed to a cost of living
Absolutely, but what I never hear him say, Stephen Pound, what I never hear anybody in terms of Ukraine say is coming to a peaceful resolution in order to help our energy crisis.
Well, I think everybody wants to come to a peaceful resolution, but, you know, it'd be like sort of negotiating with Hitler in 1941. I mean,
but it's not. I don't think that's a fair analysis.
I honestly don't think that Vladimir Putin is going to actually sit down. I mean, you know, when you think in Nagorno-Karabakh in Armenia, you've had peace talks have been going on for 30 years. It just doesn't happen. But I think the problem with Sunak's speech this morning, he actually accelerated the problem of inflation by committing another vast tranche of funds.
Yeah.
I mean, the classical definition of inflation, obviously, is, you know, too much money chasing too few goods, and then the prices then go up. But the reality is that by this process that we've had now of printing money, of actually flooding the economy with additional funds, has actually made it very worse. The one thing it won't do is actually impact on the pay rises that people are asking for, because everybody knows that that nurses' pay rise, for example, wouldn't fuel inflation, because, you know, the nurses aren't. It doesn't actually increase the cost to the consumer. But on the other hand, some of the pay rises that are being sought do. And I'm pretty sure that the government will actually start to do a read across on this. But never forget what James Carville said. You remember, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah, but do you think the public support is going to wane for this huge chunks of public money, taxpayers' money, going to Ukraine when their mortgage rates are going to go up by a big whack again in a few weeks' time?
It's one of those things, isn't it, whereby every single person is 100% in favour of it. Like, everybody's in favour of house building unless it's in their street.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's in favour, you know, of low taxes unless it means cutting services. And I think everybody's in favour of Ukraine at the moment. But if there's a direct read across,
they're not. They're not.
Well, you know, there will be a blowback.
Well, there already is a blowback, and I think it was completely ill-judged of Rishi Sunak to go on stage today and say, didn't he say something like, we will help there is no limit to the help we will give to Ukraine? I think that's a really poorly timed message at the moment with everybody, you know, on the day that we've got inflation and people's mortgages and the businesses. The fuel bills for businesses are going through the roof. We are going to see so many bankruptcies in the next 6 months.
Well, it's supermarket prices in many, many ways. That's where the rubber hits the road, and that's where people actually feel it.
And food inflation, 18.3%. It went down a tiny bit.
Well, normally at this time of year, with fruit and vegetables actually coming on stream, you know, my allotment, just for one example, you know, you should actually be reducing the prices. Yeah. It isn't, for a whole range of reasons. None of them good news for the government.
Right, Charlie, a subject that I find fascinating, actually. Facial recognition. Thousands of fans will be facially scanned at a Harry Styles concert in Cardiff. Now, this growing use of surveillance technology without any sort of legal framework around it, I find deeply troubling. Why are they doing this?
Yes, well, it's, I think, immediately a safety issue. So it says that, you know, people fully appreciate the concert as a young audience. However the concert goes won't be the people in the city centre at the time, where there'll be thousands of people coming together to see this brilliant concert. Now, Harry Styles, I'm a fan of. I was about to say a huge fan. That would be overstepping it ever so slightly.
You're a fan of Harry Styles?
But
it is mutual.
I can appreciate Harry Styles, absolutely. And I think he's just done a massive concert at Wembley, Wembley Arena.
I don't think there was any facial scanning, though.
No, there wasn't. And I think what this does lead to is sort of the encroachment of AI. And I think there are people that are incredibly worried about AI. Funny enough, another pet project of the Prime Minister, which I think, you know, if you go to any pub in the country, people aren't talking about AI, they're talking about the cost of living, they're talking about many other things. You know, and it's, you know,
it's a worrying trend, isn't it?
Mm.
That we've just got to get used to the idea that at any point our face is being scanned and we are living in China, whether you like it or not. That's what this turns into.
Well, it's terrifying because also if you've got things like ID fraud, this is just another sort of easy way, I think, to manipulate and allow those tech frauds, those very, very experienced criminal gangs and people that can tap into technology to defraud us all.
Steve, it's a big change, and was it ever discussed in Parliament that we start having facial scanning?
Well, no, I think it was mentioned once, but the reason why it didn't proceed was there was a huge range of issues, particularly regarding the ethnicity of the individual and sort of beards, hoodies, all sorts of things. There's reasons why it doesn't particularly work. But look, we're already massively surveilled in this country anyway. There's absolutely no question about that. And I just wonder, looking at those people down at Stonehenge, just wondering, because where they got facial decorations and studs and bits of metal and everything. I know this is not an edition of what the pagans say, but it just makes me wonder how accurate this actually is. But the key thing is, Bev, sorry to finish. The key thing is what happens to the data.
Yes.
Absolutely.
What does happen to it?
Yeah. Well, you tell me. I mean, the police issued a statement in Cardiff this morning on Twitter.
Right.
And so, and they're just saying, nothing to see here. Obviously, I think most
why
sentient...
did they do it then?
Well, because it's a young audience and they're getting them used to it.
And they're priming a young audience for the idea that the government at any point can look at your face, whether you've got an outstanding parking ticket or whether you've got any sort of anything you've done wrong, any small misdemeanour, not even that. We're going to know where you are.
Well, I think that...
It changes the psychology of humanity forever.
That's the crux of it, because they'll be surveilling people and they'll be looking at another list of faces of the people that they want. So matching up facial recognition on ID versus a watch list of people that they want to arrest. And I just think it goes a step too far, because if there are people in this country that reject things like the good old-fashioned stop and search, which I think is probably more effective in understanding the locality of where particular crimes are taking place, understanding particular demographics of people, where you can actually, as a police officer, say, look, we've had a spate of crime in this area, therefore there's an absolute reason to stop and search someone, rather than a random facial ID of lots of people going to
We don't support an ID card here. We don't need one if we do facial scanning.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Then it removes the need for a digital ID system. Because, and that's the point. There is no choice. You have no choice. They're taking away the element of choice. Unless you walk around with a mask on your face because you don't want to be recognised. We've already seen footage online of a police force in London, one of the Met departments, and there was a guy, they were doing a trial, and this guy was walking along with a mask on, and he just held he said, I don't want my face, and he got fined. He got fined.
Do you know, one of the extraordinary things is that there's currently 8 police officers in London who have an extraordinary mental ability to actually recognise faces, and it's almost freakish. I've met one of them, and it's a perfectly normal middle-aged police officer, absolutely, you wouldn't say anything, and yet they have this incredible ability to recognise, and they are used very widely. And what they told me was that virtually every day there is a certain, like when you've got missing people, missing children, or suspects that they're trying to find, there is a demand for this. So I think that's how it will be justified. And the problem is, it's like AI. There's a core, something in there that might be useful, but we have to buttress it with safety. We have to actually protect it.
Why is your lot not making a fuss about it?
Well, I'm sure we're a bit busy at the moment, to be honest.
No, because I think Labour would be all in favour of it. Labour would be all in favour of it, even more than the Conservatives, because they would say, but it's all about us looking after each other. It's all about the collective. It's all for the greater good and for convenience. Anything for the greater good. Get a little worried. You know what I do when I go into the supermarket? Now, you've got these awful self-scanning tills, and they've got your face on a screen in front of you because the camera...
I've never noticed that.
I go in, the first thing I do is I get a plastic bag, I put the plastic bag over the camera, and then I carry on doing my shopping.
But I go to the till because I don't want to put people out of a job.
Well, I do that, but often now there just isn't a till. My local shop, there isn't a person.
Yeah. The trouble is, you go to
individual acts of peaceful non-compliance.
You never go to a supermarket anyway, Steve.
Yes, I do. Do you mind? Lidl's is my second home. The middle aisle at Lidl. When it's the only place you can get
the middle aisle at Lidl. Don't get me
scuba
started.
kits.
Right. We need to move on.
It's German. It's Lidl.
No, it's Lidl.
Listen, I negotiated a public toilet in Hanwell when Lidl opened on the old bus garage side. And I remember the first meeting I had with Wolfgang, he said, it is Lidl.
Right,
Can you not get it?
We have to move on. We're going to be talking a bit more about inflation and various other things. Just a moment.
We'll forgive Stephen's German accent. Just terrible.
Danke, mein Herr.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Sunny start for many of us, and it's another warm one today with temperatures once again above average for the time of year. But as the temperatures rise, there will be a few more showers developing, fewer compared with recent days. Many places will escape dry. We've still got low pressure close by. We've still got this humid air coming up from the south and southwest. And there are still some showers about, mainly central and western Scotland this morning, Northern Ireland, and then developing across parts of England and into Wales as well by the afternoon. But they're not going to affect everyone. They'll be localised. Even in those areas, such as the west and the north, where we're likely to see showers, some places will avoid them and stay dry. Others will get hit by thunder, lightning and hail once again, and the risk of torrential rain and flash flooding in one or two spots. But towards the southeast, that's where it's most likely to stay dry with highs of 27 or 28 Celsius. But it's warm for all across the UK. And the showers do ease away into the evening with clear spells widely overnight. One or two mist patches forming. But otherwise, it looks like it's going to be a fine night, if rather warm once again in some spots like Cardiff and London, temperatures staying at 16 or 17 Celsius. So perhaps an uncomfortable one for sleeping. I think around coastal areas, in rural spots, a bit fresher. But widely, again, tomorrow we're going to see sunny skies from the word go. This time there'll be fewer showers again, but they'll be mainly affecting East Wales into the Midlands, north of London, and then into northern England later. One or two elsewhere, but actually for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, southern counties of England, it's largely dry with sunny spells. And it's a bit warmer in many places with that additional sunshine. Low 20s for Scotland and Northern Ireland, mid to high 20s across parts of England and Wales. Now we're going to see those temperatures rise even further in the south on Friday and Saturday, approaching 30 Celsius in some spots, whilst further north it stays fairly changeable.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On GB News. We've had a busy morning. We're talking, of course, a lot this morning about the inflation figures.
They're terrible.
They are absolutely terrible. The rate has remained at 8.7%. This is going to be hitting a lot of you very hard with mortgage rates.
Interest rates will inevitably go up tomorrow, and of course we're also reflecting on the ongoing rescue operation for the submersible lost close to the Titanic. 24 hours left.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking to Monty Halls earlier. He's an explorer, and he was saying that basically it is a ticking clock. They are up against the clock now. There are, the latest we heard last night was that there was intermittent banging that could be heard. There are, of course, 5 people on the boat, 3 of which are Brits. One of them is only a 19-year-old boy.
And of course, we're talking to Stephen Pound, the former Labour MP, a little later in the programme. He used to work on submarines in his youth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Prince William's birthday today. He's 41 today. He's going to be making an announcement about the charities that he's going to be working with, particularly a homeless charity, which is a subject that he feels very close to his heart. Keep your views coming as well this morning, gbviews at gbnews.com. But first of all, here's news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The government has set out a major package of financial support for Ukraine to bolster their economic stability as it continues to push back Russian forces. The funding, which includes £2.35 billion of World Bank loan guarantees, will support vital public services, including the cost of running schools and hospitals. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says Russia must pay for the destruction it's inflicted as a result of the war.
A vibrant, dynamic, creative European country that refuses to be subdued. So together with our allies, we will maintain our support for Ukraine's defence and for the counter-offensive. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for them to continue and to win this war.
Banging sounds have been heard in the search for the submersible tourist vessel that went missing en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic. 5 people in total are missing, with their air supply expected to run out tomorrow. British-Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his son Suleiman are on board, along with British billionaire explorer Hamish Harding. King Charles has asked to be kept informed on the search for the missing vessel. Marine biologist Monty Halls said the banging noise could be a good sign.
These banging sounds being heard every 30 minutes. Now, that is a very clear strategy by, we would hope, the occupants of that vessel to think, right, we signal every 30 minutes there's a little burst of activity, because sound is probably the one way you can locate this submersible down there. Finding the vessel is just the start, because then you've got to get it up. The opportunity to extract the 5 people from the vessel and get them into another vessel down there is nil. That's not going to happen. So you've got to get the vessel to the surface somehow, and that's a whole new challenge.
The UK's inflation rate stayed the same despite expectations of a fall. The Office for National Statistics released its figures showing it stayed at 8.7% up until May, the same rate as in April. Economists had predicted that the consumer price inflation would have dropped to 8.4%. The Chancellor said the government will continue to support the Bank of England as it seeks to squeeze inflation out of our economy. GB News' economics and business editor Liam Halligan says more could have been done to curb the rise.
I do think now the UK will come to be seen as an outlier when it comes to inflation, and it's going to spark a lot of conversations about how we run our monetary policy, the Bank of England's independence, why the Bank of England was so slow to start raising interest rates, and whether or not, had they started earlier, got on top of those inflation expectations, we wouldn't have had to have interest rates so high for so long.
Meanwhile, the average UK house price increased by 3.5% in the 12 months to April, slowing from 4.1% in March, according to official figures. London experienced the greatest monthly price rise with an increase of 2.1%, and the North East experienced the greatest annual price rise, up by 5.5%. The UK debt reached more than 100% of economic output for the very first time since 1961, according to the ONS. This comes as the government borrowed more than £20 billion in May. Net debt reached £2.6 trillion at the end of May, estimated at 100.1% of the gross domestic product. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said the government has been taking difficult decisions following the pandemic and the invasion of Ukraine. Retail giants WH Smith, Marks & Spencer's and Argos have been named and shamed for failing to pay the minimum wage. Almost £5 million was found to be owed to around 63,000 workers following investigations dating back as far as 2017. Named employers have been made to pay back what they owed and, in addition, were fined around £7 million. High street retailer WH Smith was the worst offender, according to HMRC, with the new figures claiming it failed to pay around £1 million to over 17.5 workers. The retailer blamed this on an error related to its company uniform policy. Academics warn there's been a significant rise in the number of teenage girls diagnosed with eating disorders in recent years. Experts say there could be a postcode lottery of care, with those in more deprived areas unable to access the support they need. A Department of Health and Social Care spokesperson says they're investing an additional £2.3 billion a year in NHS mental health services. And pet insurance payouts reached a record high last year, with more than £1 billion in claims. That's a 28% increase from the year before, according to the Association of British Insurers. Due to the cost of living and veterinary costs soaring, more people face higher bills to protect their pets following the increase in pet ownership during the COVID lockdown. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Now, rescuers searching for the Titan sub have reportedly heard banging sounds near to where the vessel went missing. And, of course, it has emerged that safety fears were raised before the vessel actually went missing, according to new reports.
Now, in November last year, the CBS correspondent David Pogue joined OceanGate chief executive Stockton Rush, who has been confirmed as missing on that same Titan submersible. Here's a snippet of the chat they had on CBS Sunday mornings.
Experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign?
Inside, the sub has about as much room as a minivan.
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button, that's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
It is remarkable. And that journalist on that occasion was due to go down and the weather turned and they couldn't complete the trip. But they have done them before.
Yeah, they have.
And in fact, on that same broadcast, there was one woman, unusually, because we were saying earlier, it's normally very predominantly male occupations, these sorts of endeavours. And she'd spent 30 years trying to go down, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she wasn't a particularly wealthy woman. She said she'd remortgaged her house. She just wanted to see the Titanic. That is the obsession.
Extraordinary law.
We're
joined now by retired submarine captain Ryan Ramsey. Morning to you, Ryan. Are you surprised to hear how this submersible was put together? Because it does seem almost like it was knocked up in the back of someone's garage.
I think it is concerning, and I'm sure that during the subsequent investigation into this tragedy, that will be looked at as to how they're able to build that and then deploy it. But I do note that it has deployed 3 times before down to the Titanic successfully. So this may well have been a catastrophic failure of some part of the submersible itself that's caused this issue.
Ryan, you actually used the word tragedy. Is that because you are assuming there is no way back for these men?
I think I'm a realist about all these things. My thoughts are with the families and friends and all the people that are dealing with this. But the reality is we haven't located them yet, although there has been that report from a Canadian Maritime Patrol aircraft that they heard banging. There's only 20 to 24 hours of oxygen left. The depth of water is 4,000 metres, of which no rescue has ever been conducted that I'm aware of. So you're trying to do something absolutely incredible and unique in a really collapsing time frame, and I don't see how they position stuff in the time they've got left available.
Ryan, you were a submarine captain. Looking at this vessel, how keen would you have been to go down to those sorts of depths?
So yes, I was a submarine captain, and I was motivated by service and leading my team to deliver missions for the Royal Navy and also for our country. And it's a slightly different experience. It's a duty and rather than a pleasure to go and do that. For that particular event, it wouldn't interest me. That's not my thing. But I think we need to recognise that the only way we explore the total limits of what humans can do is by doing these extreme events. So, for example, you look at Hamish, who went up in SpaceX, that flew around the world basically in one go, and has now done this. He likes to push. He wants to push the limits to see what humans can do, and we shouldn't stop that.
What is it like deep down in the ocean? I appreciate the submarines you were in, Ryan, probably go down to a depth of 300 metres as opposed to 12,000 feet. But how claustrophobic is it?
It's extremely claustrophobic, and if you take into account that all submariners are trained to become submariners, it's not an instant thing that happens. Some people don't like it when they go on board a submarine for the first time, and even during my time in command, when I was captain of HMS Turbulent, we had to remove one of the crew because he couldn't cope with the claustrophobia that goes with it. Once you're operating down at depth, it's pretty much you're in a contained environment. You operate on a 6 hours on, 6 hours off watch-keeping cycle for up to 90 to 100 days at a time. So life goes on and you get used to it. This particular case in the submersible is a very different experience. It's even more claustrophobic, but it's supposed to be short. It's supposed to be 8 hours long. Go and look at the Titanic and come back. It's not supposed to be 96 hours long. And so the conditions down, if they're on the seabed, 4 kilometres down, the temperature will be about 0 degrees Celsius, so it's going to be cold. There'll be lots of condensation, obviously, because the bodies produce heat. There's nothing they can do. They can't. Their destiny is not in their own hands. It's not as though they can fix the problem and surface a submersible. It's out of their control, and they have to wait for help.
Ryan, apparently the gentlemen on board were all in Newfoundland for about a month preparing for this endeavour. What would that sort of training have involved, do you think? Would it have been having to cope in a confined space?
Yes, I expect there'll be elements of that, and understanding the risk of the journey that they're about to undertake. So I'd be surprised if they didn't simulate for 8 hours to show them transiting down to the Titanic and back again. But if you look at the vehicle, I mean, the report that you showed from a previous reporter, there are no controls effectively. Yeah. Basically, you're pressing a button that automatically takes you down and then brings you back up. You've got no control over anything. You can't open the hatch from the inside. Not that you'd want to do that, but you can't open the hatch from the inside. You can't control the control surfaces. There is nothing for them. So I think the training was all about managing that 8 hour experience to depth and back again.
So would it have just been a propeller, like, forgive my lack of knowledge of sort of boat propulsion methods, but would it have just been a kind of propeller mechanism to go down and a propeller mechanism to go up?
So as I understand it, for very deep submersibles, they'll take an extra weight because the weight of the submersible itself won't be sufficient to take it to the bottom. That weight makes the submersible heavier, becomes negatively buoyant, and therefore it's able to descend to the surface. Once they get down there, they release the weight, which then changes the buoyancy and enables them to return to the surface. But they will have some form of propulsion, which will be a small propeller, but that's driven by a battery, and the battery only has power for a certain amount of time.
Right.
So that will have run out by now, I suspect. And we talked about oxygen remaining for another 22 or so hours, but there's also that they need the ability to deal with carbon dioxide breathing out. And if they don't have carbon dioxide absorption units, and I couldn't see any in the footage that I've seen, carbon dioxide will become the major issue for the crew on board.
Yeah, it's bleak.
It really is.
So bleak.
So, thank you so much for that and for putting it so eloquently. That's retired submarine captain Ryan Ramsey. Now, stay tuned to GB News because at 11:30 we have a GB News exclusive about the stricken sub.
OK, the Prince of Wales is celebrating his 41st birthday today. He's expected to unveil a major campaign on homelessness later this month.
Now, it's a cause he's championed since childhood. His mother, Princess Diana, of course, took him along to a homeless shelter. I think it was called Centrepoint. And to mark his 40th birthday last year, William, of course, helped sell the Big Issue magazine with Dave Martin, a street vendor. Our rural correspondent, Cameron Walker, caught up with him.
Homelessness has always stuck with me as a topic and as an issue I want to fight for. And so I've done everything I can to kind of raise the profile of homelessness. And I want to do a lot more.
In Prince William's view, homelessness is an overlooked and misunderstood problem. He refuses to believe the issue is just a fact of life and thinks a continued focus and a big support network could be the answer. Chris Fauci-Stead, frontline director at The Big Issue, agrees.
I think homelessness can absolutely be eradicated. If we think back to COVID, every single person basically was brought in. So it can be done, but there are long-term issues that need to be solved around mental health, addiction and enough funding, and I think there still needs to be a lot more work on that, and I hope that actually that's where William will put his focus.
The Big Issue magazine exists to give homeless, long-term unemployed and marginalised people the opportunity to earn money. To mark his 40th birthday last year, the Prince of Wales went undercover on the streets of London, selling magazines with Big Issue vendor Dave Martin. William was only meant to spend 20 minutes with Dave, but stayed for a whole hour until every magazine was sold.
He came across as just like you and me, you know. We got chatting natural, like you do.
He may be future king, but William chose to spend his 40th birthday last year surprising Dave with birthday cake at his pitch in Hammersmith. In return, Dave gifted his own artwork, which now hangs in Kensington Palace, according to a thank you letter the Prince had written him. William also penned an article for The Big Issue, highlighting how vendors are barely given a second glance by passers-by. Recent research from Shelter shows more than 250,000 people are homeless in England. Numbers living in temporary accommodation has risen by an alarming 74% in the last decade, something the charity believes is driven by the chronic shortage of social homes and an over-reliance on expensive and unstable private renting. Kensington Palace says His Royal Highness is expected to unveil a major campaign on homelessness later this month.
Because of who he is and connections with the issue, it'd be good for him to highlight the situation.
Prince William hopes to bring his own children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, to see what he calls fantastic organisations doing inspirational work to support those most in need, just as Princess Diana did for him. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, Cameron's with us in the studio. Now, he's going a lot further now. He gave that interview at the weekend, Cameron, didn't he, where he wants to use his own land, the Duchy of Cornwall. I think he's the largest private landowner in the country, isn't he? 132,000 acres. He's going to put social housing on the land.
Yeah, let's just talk about who Prince William is. Of course, he's the future king. He has 3 houses himself, Kensington Palace, Adelaide Cottage in Windsor and Amner Hall in Norfolk. The Duchy of Cornwall, 135,000 acres. So a lot of people are saying he's clearly in a very privileged position. From speaking to people very close to Prince William, I think I understand he's incredibly aware of that and wants to make his children aware of that as well. And he spoke at length of that in the Sunday Times interview with Roya Nika. But he was pushed on this point that you have 135,000 acres, sir. What are you planning to do with it? And a bit of a curveball for AIDS, I suspect. He actually revealed that he is in the talks to try and do something in terms of social housing on the 135,000 acre plot of land that is the Duchy of Cornwall, but Kensington Palace are keeping incredibly tight-lipped as to exactly what that is.
But here's where being a royal helps, because he can get all the big house builders round the table at Kensington Palace any time he likes. They click their finger and they'll jump and they'll move because it'll be good publicity for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge convening power that Prince William has, and I think he's certainly going to perhaps use that to his advantage when he launches his homelessness launch at some point later this month. And it is getting people around the table that have never really got around the table together before. And Prince William says he doesn't just want to manage homelessness, which is kind of what's happened really for 30 years, and basically trying to do something after the horse has bolted, but he wants to very much prevent it. And I think perhaps that's what he's going to try and do with all these different stakeholders coming together around the table to solve the issue.
I think I might be partly responsible for this. I was on This Morning about a year ago talking about this, and they said that Prince William was going to do a homeless charity, and I said, hang on a minute, he's got a house down the road, he could put at least 2,000 people in that house. And the gasp of outrage from Holly and Phil, who thought this was a terrible thing to say. I think William was listening, and I think he went, good idea, Bev, and he's doing it. I think it's great.
And also, would homelessness be on the front page of the Sunday Times if it wasn't Prince William?
Yeah, good for him.
That's exactly the sort of power he has.
and also, it does invoke memories of his mum, and she famously made her speech retiring from public life at Centrepoint. It's very closely associated with her.
Yeah.
And I can remember when she took the kids out to meet the homeless. I mean, these were issues she really cared about with a passion.
Absolutely. Prince William was first taken to Centrepoint when he was 11 by his mother, and Centrepoint was actually one of his first patronages in 2005 when he started being a working royal. And just last week he was at Reuben House, which is one of the new shelters Centrepoint has built for young people. For those of you who don't know, it's a charity which helps young people get out of homelessness. And it's really interesting because they only have to pay rent on a third of their take-home pay. So even if they only earn 6-10 grand a year, they only have to pay a third on rent, which in London is just impossible, really. So it really helps young people in particular who are at risk of homelessness onto that ladder.
Yeah.
When's it going to start happening?
What do you mean?
When will we start seeing bricks being put on the land?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? We know that Prince William has spoken to the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, and Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, but clearly Prince William has to stay out of politics, and he's very much aware of that, so he can only get people around the table to a certain extent, so we'll have to see how successful this project is when we have the details.
Tackling homelessness should not be a political issue.
It's certainly not a party political issue, is it?
No.
Well, good luck to him.
Right, thanks, Cameron, and happy birthday.
Prince William?
Prince William.
We know you're watching. Come on if you like. We'd be delighted.
Right.
Someone would like to interview.
I would indeed.
We'll have him.
This morning, still to come, 11:30, we're going to bring you a GB News exclusive update about the missing submersible in the Atlantic. You're with GB News. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel. Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:26. You're with us at Point with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner on GB News. Now, do stay with us because at 11:30 we're going to have a very important exclusive, which is to do with the stricken submersible, which was trying to explore the Titanic.
That's right. We have some news which we will bring to you at 11:30. First of all, this morning, Rishi Sunak will face his first PMQs since the Partygate lockdown video. He's facing pressure, of course, after promising a government of integrity, professionalism and accountability.
And also, of course, he's got these terrible inflation figures which have come out today. We thought it was going to go below 8%, or at least near to 8%, and it stayed stubbornly at 8.7%, and food inflation is still way up there at 18.3%.
That's right. Joining us now, live from College Green, is our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Good morning, Tom. A bad news day in terms of the economy for Rishi Sunak.
Rishi Sunak does not feel like a lucky Prime Minister today. In fact, Keir Starmer probably cannot believe his luck in terms of the series of events in the last 2 weeks. Not only is the SNP imploding in Scotland, but the Conservative Party seems to be imploding in England as well. Keir Starmer has such a plethora of choice in terms of what to go on today. No doubt touching upon that 8.7% inflation figure stuck stubbornly there for another month, no doubt pointing to the Prime Minister's pledges and potentially more than that. It's not just, of course, inflation that the Prime Minister pledged to halve. He also pledged to stop the boats, and there's some evidence in recent weeks that indeed that has been going backwards as well. This is a very sticky wicket for the Prime Minister. More dreadful numbers out this morning that UK debt has surpassed 100% of GDP. Frankly, whoever who on earth would want to be standing in the Prime Minister's shoes this afternoon? It's going to be a very tricky wicket indeed for the Prime Minister to defend.
Thanks, Tom. He's going to be on the back foot, isn't he, throughout the entire... Because there'll be some Tory MPs will be deeply, deeply concerned about these inflation figures because the policy doesn't appear to be working, and we know interest rates are going to go up again tomorrow, possibly by 0.5%.
There will indeed, and it's interesting because the previous administration, the Liz Truss administration, had been criticised from many quarters by its implicit criticism of the Bank of England. Indeed, it might be interesting to see how many Conservative backbenchers today carry forward that criticism of the Bank of England, whose only job really is to keep inflation down to 2%. Has the independent Bank of England failed in that job? The Chancellor hasn't wanted to say that. There's been much reporting that the Treasury and the Bank of England under this ministry are in lockstep, and yet just today one of the advisors to the Chancellor has been on record saying that the Bank of England may have got it wrong. This might be a crucial point of contention that perhaps only some Conservative backbenchers might have the guts to point out.
Indeed, that's Tom Harwood.
Thank you, Tom.
Our Deputy Political
Ironically, it might be a day that Rishi Sunak's quite happy to talk about Partygate instead of the inflation figures for a change. Talk about the lesser of two evils.
Now, we're going to bring you some breaking news now on the missing Titan submarine. GB News' Pip Thompson has the latest. Pip.
Yes, what we've just heard in the last few minutes is that, you know, over the last few hours, we were hearing about tapping noises.
Every half an hour.
Sources close to GB News are now telling us that it was an SOS. That is interesting. SOS is effectively a Morse code distress signal. So that puts more detail on it. Not just tapping, but if it was an SOS, then that shows that the passengers on board the submersible are still very much alive.
And can they be certain
and are calling for help?
Can they be certain they're from the submersible?
This is what we are understanding is happening. There are regular taps, an SOS signal is being sent, a distress signal. So that gives some hope, because that clock is now ticking down. 24 hours oxygen supply is left. Maybe even not even that now.
And any indication about how deep down the submersible is?
We also are hearing from our sources that last night 2 vehicles were sent down to where the submersible could be. Now, those vehicles could only go to 3,000 metres. The submersible, if it is on the seabed, is more like at 3,800 metres. They couldn't get below that. These vehicles both imploded.
Oh, gosh.
When they tried to,
They weren't
This
manned,
shows how
though.
complex and how difficult this is. We are also understanding that wives of the passengers, I don't know how many of them, whether it's 2 wives, 3 wives, because there's 5 passengers on board. But there are wives waiting on a ship for their loved ones, desperately hoping for good news. Now, what is also interesting, sorry, got lots to tell you here. There is a British firm called Magella. Now, they say they are ready to help. They are very much on standby. They are working full-time to secure the necessary air support to move their specialist equipment and support crew to the North Atlantic. Now, Magellan have what's called these ROVs, these remotely operated vehicles. They can go as far down as 6,000 metres. That's crucial if the submersible's at 3,800. But there seems to be a bit of a dispute going on, because there are claims, we understand, that the US Coast Guard, for some reason, has not yet approved their involvement.
Right. Because my understanding, and like I said, this is very much breaking news, and it is exclusive to GB News through a contact of the channel. Both of these deep water salvage companies, Ocean Infinity and Magellan, both British-owned, were 3 to 4 days away, but their equipment could have been flown over by C-17 US military transport. As you say, Pip, the US Coast Guard said they wouldn't endorse that, but now we understand that Biden is involved, the President of America is involved as to whether these resources can be enacted.
Just get on with it.
Well, let's face it, budget is not a concern to these. But budget,
it shouldn't be. But why else would it? Why else would it be blocked?
Wealthiest country in the world. What are they thinking of?
You know, if it was 3 to 4 days away, I mean, this submersible has been missing since Sunday. You would think they would get all the help they could in as quickly as possible because, as we were saying earlier, let's just say, fingers still very much crossed, that this submersible is located. If it is on the bottom of the seabed, and that's 9 Empire State Buildings, you know, it is a long way down. You locate it, you've got to bring it up.
Yeah.
How on earth are you going to do that? You can't send deep sea divers down. You've got to bring it up. You can't free them down there. The water pressure is humongous. So how do you do that? You need time to do that. There is less than 24 hours left now. That is the oxygen supply they have. And just to outline to viewers as well how difficult it must be for these 5 gentlemen on board, however experienced they are, and we know some of them are very experienced, they are in a nightmare situation. It is very small, this submersible. It's the size of a bus. It's very narrow. There's no seating area. Only one person at a time can stretch their legs out. There is one window, but you can't see anything because it's black. I mean, it's near freezing. It will be absolutely imperative that if, you know, hope against hope, they are still alive, that they are keeping their breathing under control, their heart pressure is kept low. There's a 19-year-old lad on there.
So if you're just joining us, the headline here is that sources close to GB News have revealed that the banging noises that were reported are believed to be SOS regular taps, a Save Our Souls Morse code signal, as opposed to random banging.
And those taps, we understood, were being heard every 30 minutes. Now, that would make sense, because if they're trying to conserve energy, they're not going to be making them every 2 minutes.
And this is going to spur now the rescue, the attempted rescue operation.
You would very much hope so. But as we understand at the moment, there is still no sign of the submersible. The best hope is that they locate it on the surface. I mean, how much easier would that be
Now
to
we've
mount
got
the rescue then?
The submarine pilot, of course, is Paul-Henri Nargelet, a French gentleman. We understand that the French have sent a ship to the site called the Atlante. It's got a robot that can go down to 20,000 feet, and apparently this is ignoring the US advice to do that. But obviously what we're seeing here, Pip, is there is a huge amount going on behind the scenes to try to rescue these 5 people. Sources have told GB News exclusively. The Americans told the 2 British companies, this is the Ocean Infinity and Magellan, to stand down. It is believed that 2 of the wives of the men involved are on one of the ships.
And the British company, Magellan, you know, has been very keen to stress over the last few hours that it is ready to help. It is working round the clock. It is bringing as much support and specialist equipment as it can, but it needs the authority to take off and get there.
Those are deep water salvage companies.
And it's Morse code, Pip, that's the point.
Morse code. So what we heard early this morning was that it was tapping.
Yeah.
You know, that could be very indiscriminate, couldn't it?
Yeah.
The extra detail, which is absolutely crucial, is that it is said to be an SOS distress signal, a Morse code distress signal.
And, of course, the pilot on that submersible, very experienced French mariner, would know.
He's known as Mr. Titanic because he, a number of years ago, was one of the first people to go down and visit the Titanic wreckage. So if anybody can keep those people calm, it is him. He will know exactly what to do in the circumstances.
And he's a man in his 70s.
He's not young.
No.
Shahzada Dawood, of course, the Pakistani-British billionaire who is on the boat. He made his money in fertiliser, actually, and chemicals. Apparently, he is one of the funders of the SETI Institute in California that research UFOs. Him and his son very much into science fiction. They say they're very much into pushing the depths of human understanding of the mysteries of the universe, actually. And that's part of the reason that they wanted to go down there.
We must also add, though, that there have been a lot of red flags, let's say.
Yeah.
The safety of the submersible. Some 5 years ago, it's claimed there was a former employee who was allegedly fired by the company for raising concerns about the safety and regulation surrounding it.
And there have been specific issues about communications and losing communication with the submersible below the waves.
Yeah, this ex-employee warned about problems with the carbon hull of the submersible.
Right.
He said it needed more testing, and he claims he was ignored.
And they knew what they were letting themselves in for in one respect, Pip, because when they signed the waivers, there were 3 descriptions of how they might die on the first page.
Well, let's face it, Andrew, you don't embark on a voyage like that without knowing that could be a possibility. But you believe the risk is worth taking. It's part of the thrill of it, isn't it?
And we were talking to a retired Royal Navy submarine captain. It is extraordinary that those sophisticated Royal Navy submarines can only go down 300 metres. This tiny little, patched up, it looks to me, submersible is nearly 4,000 metres below the ocean, below the waves.
And you pilot it using a Sony PlayStation type game controller.
Yeah.
Apparently,
how much control does that give you?
What happens in terms of how this gets away from the coastline, this particular vehicle, it gets attached to a platform and then it's dragged out by other boats. And, of course, in this situation, it's dragged 435 miles off the coast of Canada in Newfoundland, at which point it's dropped. Effectively, the platform releases it and it drops to the bottom. And as we heard earlier, that really it's very basic technology to get it up and to get it down.
It was never supposed to be an expedition, lasting many days.
No,
the
8 hours.
The actual descent down to the wreckage was 2 hours down,
6
several hours looking
viewing.
at the wreckage, which is in 2 parts at the bottom, and then 2 hours back
and
up.
we've all asked the question, why didn't it remain attached to something above the sea? Because the cable could get caught in the currents, could be dragged into the Titanic.
I mean, one expert also raised concerns saying what there should have been and there wasn't was a backup sub.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are so many lessons that will be learned.
And of course, they can't get out, even if they are on the surface, because they're locked
from
in.
the outside.
The interview with the CEO, Stockton Rush, who is one of the guys who's on the boat at the moment as well. In the interview that we saw earlier, which was a clip from CBS, looking quite prophetic now, it has to be said, he's asked at that point, how profitable is this? And he says at the time, we haven't made a profit yet. We haven't made a profit yet. It was certainly taking a lot of investment to get this business, OceanGate, off the ground, hasn't made a profit yet. Well,
that's the end of this business, because who would? I mean,
take this risk again.
I remember I've done 3 parachute jumps, and I wouldn't do one again because I'm a bit too old and sensible now. This just, when you read about it, you think, what were they thinking of?
See, I'm, of course, thinking about the wives. My ex-husband used to do various adventures which involved... He rowed across the Atlantic in a 2-man boat with Ben Fogle. We knew that there was no rescue availability if he was to drown. And at one point they did capsize and we did lose contact with them for about 10 days or so. And when they did eventually arrive in Antigua after 50 days and nights at sea on a tiny little boat, we didn't know what kind of state they were in. And as the wife, what do you think when your partner's going to go and do something like this? You trust that they've done their preparation. You have to trust them that they know their limits and that they have accounted for every eventuality. The mother of Suleiman Dawood, the wife of Shahzada Dawood, she must have had faith that these people were going to keep her family safe.
And of course she would have asked the questions, but how horrific to think there is a wife, she's a wife, but she's also a mother of a 19-year-old.
And you know what? When it does go wrong, as it did with my ex-husband, he was doing across America on his bike and he got hit by a truck. And when it goes wrong, in that moment, you think, why did we ever think this was a sensible thing to do? In that moment, suddenly you have clarity that optimism has obfuscated whilst you're all embarked on this particular endeavour.
Let's get Stephen Pound and Charlie Rowley here. This is fabulous news. On the surface, SOS, they're alive. Somebody is.
It is. And when the clock is against you, when the clock is ticking and everybody is hanging on for that, minutiae bit of hope, this is something that is bringing hope to all of those that are part of the rescue service, everybody that's come together to, and the private sector, yachtsmen have sort of added their weight behind the search. any small thing that people can hold on to, and particularly for the families who are obviously, are hopeless at this point. They can do nothing about it.
But one of the key things is to actually get a response to that.
You operate in submarines.
Briefly, yeah, and it's an extraordinary sensation. But the thing to do at the moment is absolutely not to panic.
Yeah.
I mean, when you actually go into submarines, first of all, it's very strange. Like they change the lights from white to amber about 6 o'clock in the evening to give the illusion of dusk. And I remember the gym in my boat was actually an exercise bicycle under the missile. But there's some people who actually rather enjoy that feeling. But the main thing to do is if you panic, and people do, I saw people do it. Suddenly the claustrophobia can hit you. Then that's disaster. And I don't want to wish this on anybody. But the other key thing about this bathyscaphe or this particular submersible is with a submarine, you actually don't rise to the surface like a VTOL. What you do is you actually have forward propulsion, and the vanes will then direct you upwards. With this particular one, it's to do with gravity. They had these metal-filled pipes and sandbags, God help us.
I know.
And which took them down, and then the idea is they jettisoned the bags, they jettisoned all the ballast
yeah.
and rise. Well, I'm sorry.
Construction pipes were part of the ballast.
I mean, and the thing is run with a games console, apparently. I mean, I have to say, there's going to be the mother of all claims if anything disastrous. And please, God, nothing bad does happen.
It just feels to me like this was bodged up in a garage.
Wow.
Doesn't it to you?
250,000 quid, you don't get much for that nowadays.
It does. But this was part of the eventer was very proud of it. He went on, this is part of their promotional video to say that they've been able to construct this submersible out of just ordinary items off the shelf.
And to give you the quote from Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, who is one of the guys on the boat now, the quote in that interview was, "The thrusters can fail, the lights can go out, but you will still be safe."
Well, it's supposed to have 7 backups on that one. And I'm not even sure about the thrusters. I mean, the thing is, it's about the size of a Ford Transit van at best, if you think about it.
Yeah.
With actually a separate toilet with a curtain behind it. I mean, £250,000 for that? I wouldn't go down there.
Yeah, but was it ever safe?
Yeah, and the really terrifying thing is, in a few years to come, maybe people will... I mean, God forbid anything dreadful happens, but I can imagine sort of future submersible tours to see where the submersible was next to the Titanic.
They're already talking about
Are they really?
social media.
It sounds sick, but I mean, it's on the other hand, it's the real world.
Yeah.
Let's bring you let's bring you the headlines. This is sources close to GB News. This is an exclusive to our channel. We are hearing that the regular taps which have been reported from the boats are SOS signals. So save our souls, Morse code. I bet you can do it, Steve. ...
...
Thank you very much.
Every 30 minutes they're coming.
The two deep water salvage companies are Ocean Infinity and Magellan. They're both British-owned companies. They were 3 to 4 days away, but their equipment could have been flown over by US military transport. But we understand the US Coast Guard decided not to fund that.
Isn't it?
And we now understand that at that point, Joe Biden has got involved. What will happen there, we do not know. The submersible is believed to be at 3,800 metres. That's 2.3 miles, which I think is pretty much the seabed.
It's the seabed.
At that particular point. Last night, they sent down 2 vehicles. They only went down to 3,000 metres and both imploded when they got below 3,000 metres.
We should say they were unmanned.
They were unmanned. Submersibles. What would they have been like, Stephen?
Well, I mean, the first thing to do is sonar buoys. They'll probably be dropping sonar buoys. Now, they're the same things that we used to drop off the stern of frigates, mostly to detect submarines, and actually made in Greenfield, oddly enough. But so the point about the sonar buoys is once you've actually locked onto the sound, and this is obviously somebody is simply tapping on the bulkhead of the vessel, with a hammer or something, you can then track in on that. And the sonar buoys are operative down to some pretty deep depth. We're talking about 3 or 4 miles down there.
Right.
So this could be the best possible news, because once the sonar buoy, which can then be retrieved, is actually locked onto that, then we actually have the vector that we can actually approach. The question is, what the hell do we do? We have I don't think anybody in the world has any mechanism for actually going down there and extracting.
Winching.
No. So you're going to have to try to lift it. Now, the thing weighs, 200 pounds, I think, doesn't it? And
something like that.
So I guess the best case scenario, if it is found and it is in some way entangled, could they disentangle this?
I think it's power we're talking about. I think it's a power outage. Would be the obvious problem. What they need to do, they possibly externally, they could actually jettison the ballast.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's been many, many years since I was in boats.
Well, it's extraordinary good news in one sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
But is it like these mine rescue stories? You know, there's been some very, I mean, you know, and I know, there's incredible films.
And the children found in the out of
right.
the
Pip, Prime Minister's question time's waiting. Pip, thank you so much. Stephen, Charlie as well. Thank you all very much.
Let's hope when we're with you tomorrow, we've got really good news.
Please, God.
Time.
Let's hope so. PMQ's next. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the people's channel.